Member Amy Adams from Selwyn. Thank you.
Mr Speaker.
I call the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, it's a pleasure to join the discussion of this Members' Bill from Michael Woodhouse and to confirm that Labor supports this bill. The Fair Trading Soliciting on behalf of Charities Amendment Bill is a good bill that addresses an area of concern for the public, and that is why we are supporting it. Mr Speaker, the bill was rewritten in the Select Committee to enable regulations to be made relating to disclosure by fundraisers making requests for charitable purposes. Currently, there are no rules on what has to be disclosed except that no misleading or deceptive statements may be made. Mr Speaker, it does raise the question of why, given that this bill has widespread support in the House and given that its purposes are clearly in the public interest, why this is not a government bill. Mr Speaker, there is a tendency for the government to pass to members to handle as members' matters, matters which, from the point of view of the Labor opposition, are worthy of the support of the government in a more formal way. It is thus open to the interpretation, perhaps the misinterpretation, that it is trivialising matters that are of some considerable value, in this case to the charitable and non-governmental sector. Mr Speaker, in 2002, Consumer Magazine conducted an inquiry into the Children at Risk Education Foundation, CARE, and found that 75 cents in every dollar was going to its telemarketing company. Mr Speaker, the issue was again raised in the media as a result of Epilepsy New Zealand decisions to cut ties with the fundraiser, the Epilepsy Foundation. In the last 3 years, according to Epilepsy New Zealand, the Epilepsy Foundation gathered $2.82 million in donations on their behalf, and approximately 2.1 out of 2.8 went straight into the pockets of the telemarketers. Mr Speaker, I think for the average New Zealander on the street, when they hear numbers like that, they just have to ask the question, how can that be right? Because they give generously to the purpose for which the telemarketing is being done, to help the vulnerable individuals who are the recipients of the care. They don't do it simply to patronise, in this case, some 75% of the margin going to the telemarketers. Another example, the telethon on TV3 for the benefit of Kids Can Charitable Trust was in the spotlight for claims that less than 20 cents in the dollar raised was passed through to disadvantaged children. The Trust recently announced that 80% of the proceeds were passed on to the charity. Mr Speaker, in a former life I used to manage an overseas aid program with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, in fact 2 former lives ago. But not so long ago that I've forgotten the level of the administration costs of New Zealand's foreign aid. In those days it was 11 cents in the dollar, and 89 cents in the dollar went to the needy people in the countries, in that case in the South Pacific, that New Zealand was seeking to assist. So, Mr Speaker, it's good enough for the New Zealand government to manage its overseas aid endeavours on an 11% overhead. It's certainly incumbent on private marketing agencies to take less than 80%, and this bill is to be commended for shedding light on that issue. Another example, I hope the World Vision Organisation won't mind me saying that I understand that their overheads are somewhat less than 20%. Still not insignificant, but not at such a level that donors would feel aggrieved. Mr Speaker, in any case, those overheads are transparent in their accounts and are known to donors such as probably many of the members in this House who support our children through that organisation. Mr Speaker, TVNZ's show Dancing with the Stars was also caught up in the controversy, with just about 60% of the money raised for charities by contestants actually making it to recipients. Mr Speaker, the bill recognises the right of people to know where their hard-earned money will go, to the charity of their choice or some profit-making third party. It's consistent with sound consumer rights principles like transparency and informed choice, and we need the Minister of Consumer Affairs to start addressing the important transparency matters for consumers, such as the action of loan sharks. Mr Speaker, I recognise the presence in the House of Sam Lotuinga, who's done some useful work in that area, much of it at the prompting of Carol Beaumont, the former Labour MP. I would say in response to my colleague, the Honourable Ruth Dyson, how can I put it, all the useful stuff in response to my colleague, former colleague Carol Beaumont. And isn't it interesting how Mr Lotuinga was woken from his slumber by the actions of the Labour Party, woken from his slumber. Look, it's remarkable. It is remarkable how some members opposite can make controversy out of a universally supported bill, even when I was being, paying him half a compliment, certainly not the whole compliment. But there you go. Mr Speaker, that's Parliament. No wonder the public thinks it's an acquired taste. Why isn't it cutting up Sam's seat? Well, that is a very interesting question. And I say to my raucous colleagues, we ought to be decent to Mr Lotuinga for as long as he's here with us, because with the boundary changes coming, that may not be that long. And it's very nice to see Jonathan Coleman here from Saving the Western World, from whatever it is he's been saving it from. And Mr Speaker, we hope that he's here for not too long as well. But Mr Speaker, back to public accountability for charitable giving. Surely that is something that all members of this House can agree on, provided it's not too burdensome. Mr Speaker, we say only the following, that this should have been a government bill. The Commerce Select Committee is currently working its way through the consumer goods law reform, and that is another area where I anticipate there will be broad consensus in this House. And I guess the public watching in or listening in will probably be reassured to see Parliament actually can cooperate on quite a lot of things, particularly in Select Committee and often in members' days where a common sense idea is brought to the House floor. I commend Michael Woodhouse for doing so on this matter. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Speaker.
I call the Honourable Member David Cleendon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'm very happy to continue